Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Waypoint. Today we are playing Guild Wars 2 once again. However, we do have lots to talk about with lots of different games. But first of all, this is my Norn Revenant, my Unga Bunga lady who hits things with her big mace and her big sword. And I've barely played her and I barely know how to play her, but I thought since we seem to be doing this kind of Guild Wars 2-a-thon in Weekly Waypoint lately, I might as well keep that up with each of the characters that I currently have, and so today it's her turn. This is Aurora Cyan. Not Saiyan, she's not a Super Saiyan. I went for the name of a mountain that snow leopards live on, but the more I think about it, the more I might change that surname, because everyone's just going to see it as Super Saiyan. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's not what I was going for. But yes, I've been continuing to play Guild Wars 2 this week, been steadily making my way through Living World Season 4. I will not divulge story details, don't worry, but I will give vague overall impressions of each episode so far. I had a really bad time with episode 1. In fact, I think I talked about this last week. I've been making my way through this quite slowly. I had a really bad time with episode 1. I didn't love the story, the setting, the theme, the enemies, the gameplay elements. I had a bad time with it, but episode 2 I thoroughly loved. It was fantastic. All those things I just said I didn't like about episode 1, I did like about episode 2. And now I've made my way to episode 3, and despite one of the worst designed missions in the history of a game to open, I kept my cool, I remained patient, and now I'm playing through that, and I think I get my roller beetle soon, which is quite exciting. I do have to go out of my way to find secret little treasures all over the map in order to unlock it, but you know, I tried doing that without looking up a guide, and I burned myself out on that last night, but I'll just look up a guide today and finish that off, because I want to roll around on my roller beetle and go noom. And no, I do not have my griffin unlocked yet. I'm also considering selling my reserve of mystic coins to get this damn griffin, because it looks like so much fun. I know that's going to hurt me in the long run, but I really don't care about legendary weapon crafting right now. I don't know. I mean, I have gambled pretty much all of my crafting resources away anyway on the Festival of the Four Winds event, trying to get one of those cosmetics that sells for like 4,000 gold, which is, if you do not play this game, a lot of gold. I offset that by selling most of my ectoplasm reserves, while the buying was good because most people are trading ectoplasm to try and get those rares, to get the crates, to try and get the rares out of the crates. My conscience is a little concerned about the real world gambling elements of this, in regards to you can buy gold to buy ectoplasm off the trading post, to gamble, to try and get more gold to sell back for gems. But yeah, I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? I just don't want to enable anyone who has issues, but hey, I guess the responsibility for that lies with ArenaNet and NCSoft, and not me, who is just a player interacting with the economy of the game. And yes, there's also the tiny drop in a giant ocean element of things as well. I know, it's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? But anywho, the moral of the story is, I did not get any big 4,000 gold cosmetics to sell on the trading post, and now I am lacking a lot of crafting resources. Further solidifying my desire not to get into gambling too much with real money, beyond buying the occasional scratch card or lottery ticket. Anyway, shall we move on? World of Warcraft Midnight is being revealed tomorrow, which is an interesting sentence considering we know that World of Warcraft Midnight exists, we know where we're going, we know vaguely what we're doing, uniting the elven tribes or whatever. It's very interesting being in the middle of a trilogy of expansions, all of which we know the names of and general direction of. This is the first time this has happened in World of Warcraft history. However, of course, we do not know the concrete details of the expansion, such as, you know, is there going to be a new class or race? Where exactly in Quel'thalas are we going? Like, how are they going to do the whole, we've been to this part of the world before, but we're overhauling it, and it is the new world zone to go to now? Because that's the first time we've ever done that in World of Warcraft, which I think is a very interesting precedent that they're setting, because we're doing that again in the last Titan with Northrend, right? A lot of people think there might be a new Demon Hunter spec. I personally think that a single new spec for an entire expansion feels like a bit of an undersell, but that's just me, I guess. I guess when you think about it, when Demon Hunters were originally released, that was a new class that only had 2 specs. Same with Evokers, actually. And when you think about the Irvin that got released, normally when we get a new race for an expansion, we get 2 new races, 1 Alliance and 1 Horde. And the Irvin, well, 1 race for both factions, which is a little different. I guess it's the same for Pandaren. But either way, I guess I'm saying it's not entirely unprecedented, this scope of an addition to the game. But I would prefer a new class, please, thanks. Although, Void Elf or Void Spec Demon Hunter would go kind of hard, I suppose, if they gave them to Void Elves too. I'm of the opinion that if they are going to introduce a new Demon Hunter spec, it might be a, like, you know, 11.2.5 or 11.2.7 patch thing, although maybe they would call it a midnight feature and require an expansion pre-order to unlock it or some shit. Man, it's just weird speculating on a new expansion without having to speculate what it's going to be and where we're going to go. I think by the time Last Titan is being announced, I will end up missing this quite a bit, and I hope that in future we get individual expansion announcements again, just because it's more fun. Although that being said, the prospect of knowing where we're going this far in advance has its own kind of speculative fun as well. Of course, the big standout showcase feature is going to be housing. We already know quite a lot about housing thanks to their wonderful preview blog posts and some of the creators they've invited to come and test it and stuff. We pretty much know that housing is going to be a pre-order early access feature, by which we don't mean early access 3 days before the expansion hits, but it will come out in a 0.5 or 0.7 patch and we'll be able to play it if we have the expansion pre-ordered. As far as story goes, you might remember me being exceptionally grumpy about 11.2, perhaps a little bit more than was deserved. So how am I feeling about the story going forward? I think a lot of people are doing a bit of copium saying that Metzen wasn't that involved with the War Within. I think he would have definitely been quite heavily involved with the story of 11.2. If Russell T Davies returning to Doctor Who has taught us anything, it's that yeah, the people that we loved who wrote the story originally still had iffy moments of the story that they wrote originally, and will still have iffy moments of writing the story again. Also, Chris Metzen isn't writing the entire story. It's not perfectly analog, but you know what I mean. But broadly speaking, yes, I would be surprised if the midnight reveal did not get me super hyped and excited for the game again. We've also learned a lot about Legion Remix this week, and that looks bloody brilliant and exciting. There's so many things that they've announced which have got me excited about that event. Little things like the fact that bronze is now just a currency for cosmetics, which I have been complaining about Blizzard making currencies share cosmetics and important account unlocks and like character power unlocks since Shadowlands, since Anima, so it's nice that they finally woken up and realized, oh, we should stop doing that. Because it felt so bad having to look at the currency you've just spent ages earning and go, I need to spend this on character upgrades, I don't get to get any of the cool stuff. Or, to be fair, in Miss of Pandaria Remix's case, I'm just gonna be weak, I don't give a shit, I need these cosmetics. That's not a fun decision to have to make, that's an annoying one. They're also giving us 5 more character slots, hooray. They're giving us, or they are allowing us to unlock Fel corrupted versions of all of the Order Hall mounts, which look so cool, and have cemented my decision to main a Warlock through Legion Remix, because I think the Warlock class Order Hall is the one that I want to have spent more time with, and I don't know, something about time walking itself, like the time walking campaigns for leveling up characters, I just can't get into Order Halls when I do that. And originally, I was intending to make a undead Warlock called Moravar, because I have an undead warlock called Moravar who's like level 20, and I could just delete him and remake him. However, I have since learned that we can make Night Elf warlocks, and I somehow missed that 10.1.5 update because I've always wanted to have a Night Elf warlock. And I've already designed her and created her, and I'm going to obviously delete her and remake her exactly the same when Remix hits. But I'm so excited to play Essenja, my Night Elf warlock. She was once a priestess of the moon, but after the burning of Teldrassil, things changed for her. So yes, between Legion Remix, Housing coming out, and Midnight itself, I am very excited for the future of WoW, despite currently being a little bit disillusioned with 11.2. In fact, I think I'm more excited for Housing and for Legion Remix than I am for Midnight itself. Obviously, we haven't had the reveal yet, my opinion may change, but just more and more, in general, I've been feeling that way. Like, the major content updates I'm less excited about. I'm more anticipating like the limited time event stuff, although I wish they weren't so limited time and FOMO and all that, but more like the game system updates and stuff like that. I suppose I could make some official predictions as to what I think is going to happen with the midnight reveal. They're not going to be all that different to a lot of the predictions you've heard from other people, but they come from me. I don't think we'll get a new race. I do think we might get a new class, because everything about Midnight says we want to do Legion again. Everything about it says Legion was awesome, and everyone loved Legion, and we want this to be the Void Legion. And how do we do that? Legion was a class with a new expansion that was related to the theme of the expansion, so we need Midnight to be an expansion with a new class that relates to the theme of the expansion. Could be Demon Hunter Void Spec, but it could also be a new Void-related class, because I don't think we really have a Void-related class. We have Void-related specs, we have Shadow Priest, we have, I guess, Warlock has some Void-related stuff to it, but I don't think we really have a Void class, right? And I don't really know what they could look to in WoW lore that they could lean on to be the Void class, the way that Demon Hunters were the Fel class, although Warlocks were also a Fel class, but you know what I mean. So they'll probably just have to invent something new, like they did with Evokers, and be like, it was always a thing, they were just sleeping for thousands of years. And with that in mind, I'm thinking I want another bow class, and I think a Void bow kind of a class, or at least a spec, and then like a Void like swords spec or something, could go pretty hard. I mean, maybe they would have started introducing that in the 11.2 patch with like Koresh lore and stuff like that. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm hoping for the moon. I know a lot of people think Bard is a possibility because of the Radiant song and the idea of people on Azeroth being, you know, inspired by it and, you know, becoming these Bard type figures with magical Radiant music magic. And I think that's a really cool idea, but I also think that's a Last Titan class. I think if we don't get a class in Midnight, we will get Bard in Last Titan. What I really hope we do not get is Tinker, because everyone always wants Tinker, and most of the time I don't want it anyway, but for Midnight I especially don't want it, because it's the Void expansion. Why are we suddenly doing gnomes and goblins? Stop predicting Tinker! Could also be a valid Last Titan class. Anyway, Silvermoon player housing neighborhood, maybe? I could see them making that like a 12.1 or a 12.2 thing, but announcing it as part of the expansion. I think something we might see is, obviously we're going to see a larger scale Blood Elf area as the expansion, right? Because it's not going to be the same size, or that's going to be like two fairly small zones by modern comparison. So I think we're going to see Quel'thalas be divvied up into 4 or 5 zones, and so we're going to see new lore about the different regions of the Ghostlands and the different regions of, you know, all that stuff. I don't know if we're going to get the Sunwell Island as a zone, like a leveling zone. I think that could be like a raid, like it gets corrupted by the Void or whatever. I think that's like an easy fucking an easy prediction that's going to happen. I'll be interested to see the effect that has on Blood Elves. Maybe it'll birth more Void Elves. Something that was stuck in my mind, I don't really think this is going to happen, but when they said that we would spend Midnight uniting the Elven tribes, I did start to wonder if they were going to like introduce a third faction to the game as like the Elven faction, and then Night Elves and Blood Elves might move to it or have the option to move to it or whatever. However, if I'm thinking realistically, I think they're honestly trying to move away from factions in terms of gameplay, so maybe not. A lot of people are talking about, will we see Sylvanas again? And I wouldn't hate that, actually. I think that they could do a lot of cool stuff with her character if they want to end her story. I think it would have to be an end to her story, though. We've already had an ending, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they haven't ended it, but I think if they do bring back Sylvanas, it has to be for the final time. I wonder if we'll see Malfurion and Tyrande, because I was talking to Reese about this the other day, and I said, nah, I'm pretty sure they're retired. Like, they've had an ending as well. They're retired in Belameth, right? However, if we're uniting the Elven tribes this expansion, I really am fucking not letting that phrase go, I guess. That would probably be important for the leaders of the Night Elf people, right? And are they still the leaders of the Night Elf people, or is that Chandris now? I don't know if that ever got fully tackled. Maybe that's a prequel novel thing. Maybe we'll learn about that from Christy Golden. I forget what the synopsis of that was or what we know about it. But yeah, as far as Sylvanas goes, I mean, it's too perfect to have this entire you know, blood elf, frickin' Quel'thalas story, and not have all three Windrunner sisters be a part of it. And I would also like to explore Sylvanas, whose soul has been fully restored, as kind of dumb as that story revelation was. I think they could do some fun stuff with it now that it has been done, and exploring who she is now. Because we got that a little bit in, what would it have been, 9.2, 9.3 or whatever it was. But I would like to see that post I've just spent thousands of years in the Moor because time works differently in Shadowlands or whatever. I bet they would do that. You know they're going to do that. And the Thanos will come back as well if she does, and that'll be interesting to re-explore. The main thing I want to see from Midnight isn't something I can predict for a Midnight Revelation, unless they're going to go full, like, you know, roadmap mode again. What I want to see is narrative cohesion across an entire expansion, because they said they were going to get serious about storytelling or whatever. And then we got 11.0, The War Within, which was a really solid opener for the expansion, although I do wish that they would have tied up more story threads that they started, especially because of my actual criticism going on from this sentence, which is 11.1, which felt like a kind of a non sequitur crowbarred in Goblin Patch, and then followed by 11.2, which was ethereal stuff which could have been really cool, but I had my issues with it. And now where are we? With the 11.0 stuff. Like, I feel like a lot of stuff hasn't been resolved, or at least hasn't been resolved in a suitably exciting and meaningful way. I mean, we make the what sword joke, right? This expansion started with a cinematic going, look, we're gonna deal with a sword, and has that come up again? Like, come on. I know, it was aimed at something, they were just talking about the fact that it was aimed at the world soul, but I feel like it's a perfect microcosm of my issues with 11.0 stories in general, like the crystal with the Irathi, and the Irathi in general, and the Haranir in general, and just so many things feel like they had so much more to be explored and just kind of haven't. Anyway, we're veering off. That's going to be my World of Warcraft Midnight reveal discussion before it happens. That was quite a lot of WoW talk for a Guild Wars 2 weekly waypoint, wasn't it? As for other Gamescom things I would like to see there, I don't know. I looked at announcements from last year's Gamescom to remind myself the scope of what we might see, and EA, I don't know if they announced Star Wars Outlaws there, if they just did a big gameplay demo. I think they just did a big gameplay demo, but there were a few games that were announced there that ended up being quite big. There were a few games that were announced there that ended up not. I think more of the case was that it was the following days they had like showcases of games we already knew about but didn't know all that much about the details of. But I don't know, man, when I cast my mind around for like games I want to see announced, nothing comes to mind. I don't think, maybe this is just a result of me falling off of the Xbox ecosystem recently, but I don't think there's anything in terms of AAA games or, you know, the kind of stuff that will be announced at one of these events that I'm hoping to see or learn more about or would expect to see, I guess. So just surprise me with something awesome. I don't know. Annoyingly, I'm going to be at work during opening night live. I think that's what they call it, right, for Gamescom. But hopefully I should be able to catch all the WoW Midnight stuff shortly after it happens on my break. Obviously, the weekly waypoint is a fair amount of time away from the Midnight expansion, so while I will talk about it in detail next week, feel free to follow me on like Blue Sky for more immediate reaction. In other gaming news this week, I finished Pokémon Violet, and you're gonna see this when the video comes out, but I'll tell you about it right now, and I'm not gonna give any spoilers away, but the story of that game, for the first 27 hours, which was most of my playthrough, is kind of boring. It's what you expect. It lacks substance, it lacks depth. It's just, okay, you're in this region called Paldea. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's different to what they've done in other games. You're part of a school, there's these 3 different kind of paths you go down, like the gym path, the Titan's path, the Team Star path. And I guess the ending of those stories it's fine. It's good, it's decent, it's fine, but it did not have me particularly hooked. Generally speaking, I don't come to Pokemon games for the story, so I wasn't exactly upset about this. However, the final 2 hours of the game, after you've done all of those 3 story paths and they kind of culminate, and you go do the thing, which I'm not going to talk about, that was incredible. And there seems to be a general consensus among Scarlet and Violet players, because I've been talking to people about this since, but the last 2 hours of that game are some of the best Pokemon story beats I've played. It was so intriguing and so exciting, and you'll see the details in my video, like I said, but there were so many things that they did that made me shout with joy. I'm not used to experiencing that from a Pokemon game. I mean, Pokemon Legends Arceus, I suppose, did that to me with the final fight. Oh, I say final fight, with one of the final fights. The game ends a few times. Ah, hell, it's not a spoiler. You would expect Giratina to be in a game. With what they did with Giratina, that got me super hyped. But yeah, I was not expecting to be so hyped up and ultimately so moved by the ending of Pokemon Violet as well. Damn. I am now doing the post-game, and by post-game I mean like the true post-game, like the narrative is clearly over and you're just kind of like revisiting areas and stuff like that. I do intend to pick up the Hidden Treasure of Area Zero DLC, which I was grumpy about on release because the first one baited me because I thought it was going to be another Legends reveal long before ZA was revealed. And I saw a negative review for the second one just because it was more Scarlet and Violet and it performs terribly and so on and so forth. However, I've ended up quite liking my time with Pokemon Violet despite everything, so I think I'm cool for more of that. Also, I really liked Pokemon Sword and Shield's DLCs, and I do love it when a Pokemon game goes, alright, now here's the back catalogue of legendaries and here's how you're going to go and encounter them all and catch them all. I do love that about some Pokemon titles which do that. It used to be reserved for like your Platinums or like your Ultra Sun and Ultra Moons and stuff like that. Well, actually, it might be in Sun and Moon as well, I don't actually know. But nowadays it's kind of a DLC feature, and I'm cool with it. I still haven't done all the Dynamax adventures to get all the legendaries in Pokemon Sword, but I like knowing that I can if I want to. But mostly I've been taking on Terra raids, like 5-star Terra raids, you know, ones where you can actually hit the boss before they just fall over because someone, you know, did a gust of wind and blew them over. And mostly I'm having a good time. I still think the netcode for like the raids is shit. You spend a lot of time just staring blankly, waiting for anything to happen, and then 50 things happen at once. I don't love the kind of semi-real-time nature of Terra raids as opposed to Dynamax raids. It feels chaotic and annoying. However, I am mostly having a good time with them. The thing I loved about Pokemon Sword's endgame was actually being able to not have to have a team of Pokemon, but a single Pokemon from a box to tackle a single Pokemon that you're fighting, and therefore it feels like more Pokemon are more viable for more times, if you know what I mean. And so Scarlet and Violet definitely has the same thing with Terra raids, and I'm enjoying kind of like transferring over some Pokemon home Pokemon and kind of like reacquainting myself with them and building up this kind of roster of like, oh, what am I going to sort my boxes as, and so on and so forth. It's a good time. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is just real quick. I have started a new anime. It's cute, it's fun, it's quite lighthearted, it's about pirates. I don't think I haven't looked yet, but I doubt it goes on for too long. It's called One Piece. I'm on like episode 11 or 12, probably like a third of a way through the series if I had to guess. No, but for real. I did read the first 100 issues of One Piece. I didn't specifically set out to only read 100 issues of it, or chapters of it, sorry. I read both manga and comics and I get the terminology mixed up. I got distracted around chapter 100, which if you're not aware is around the time when they get to the Grand Line for the first time. But a few friends of mine were discussing the anime and I decided I might as well just go ahead and start watching that instead of continuing reading the manga. It'll be more time consuming, but if it's a good time, then I'm down for it. And yeah, I'm just up to pretty much the Usopp stuff where we're meeting him and dealing with the butler and all of that. And you know, as someone who's watched all of Bleach and all of Naruto, I've kind of always side-eyed One Piece, and I've never really watched it or engaged with it that much, just because, as I've said many times before, I didn't used to really like pirates and like maritime themes and that kind of stuff. I always blamed it on growing up in a coastal city, but ultimately it's just not really my bag. Like if we're talking World of Warcraft, for instance, I never really liked Borealis or like that place as a hub, you know, that kind of thing. However, mostly due to my time reading the One Piece manga probably like a year or two ago, I've softened on pirates, and now I'm, you know, I think it can be fun and cool. And looking at One Piece and at Luffy and everything, I looked back at Bleach and I looked back at Naruto, and I used to think like, does this anime really have like the same emotional weight as these? Like, does it have the same kind of like, you know, protagonist journey of becoming super powerful you know, dealing with all the things that they deal with and getting everyone to believe in them and so on and so forth. Like, does it have the kind of stuff I care about? Because from what I've seen, even in my first 100 chapters of reading One Piece, you know, I still kind of have those questions. However, if I remember rightly, it was the Arlong arc that I read that made me go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this has what I'm looking for. This has, you know, emotional tension and, you know, stuff like that. Sorry, I've worded too much. I'm not wording too good anymore. I will keep you updated on my One Piece journey. Let's see if we're gonna get all the way to episode 1100 or whatever. I am watching it dubbed because that's more approachable and accessible in the United Kingdom at the minute. It's all on BBC iPlayer dubbed, and it's actually not that bad dubbed for like a 1999 anime in season 1 or something, right? It does feel very Pokemon. In fact, I think it's probably the same people who dubbed Pokemon who did this. I think I heard Jesse at one point. But you know, I'm enjoying it. It's fine. It's fun. It's good. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this episode of A Weekly Waypoint. I hope you enjoyed your time here today. If you would like to support the channel, you could always leave a like or subscribe or any of those good things. But otherwise, I will see you in whatever I make next.